I'm Wyatt Cash with Scoop News Group, and we're here at FedScoop's ITModTalks with Alexis Bonnell, Strategic Business Executive for the Public Sector at Google Cloud. Alexis, welcome, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Wyatt.
So let me start by asking, we're a bit more than a year into the Biden administration, and I'm curious, where have you seen some of the greatest progress in IT modernization during that time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's great progress happening in IT modernization, especially in the areas of zero trust, cyber, and I'm so excited about really the recent attention that customer experience is starting to gain steam. But I also think there's an enormous potential for missed opportunity, and not because of technology specifically, but more on the opportunity to lead differently as we do this type of IT modernization and transformation. And why earlier in the program, I spoke about living system leadership, and I'm hoping folks can watch and kind of celebrate all of the different living system leaders out there that, that I mentioned. But I think, what we're really bringing together in that is the fact that there's an unprecedented amount of resources being invested in digital modernization and transformation right now. And so one of the questions is, whether it's cyber, whether it is IT modernization generally, whether it is customer experience, the question is, what is the aperture of those leadership decisions around those investments? Is it narrow, maybe only looking at the past or the pain of the present? Or is it wide with a broader living system leadership that will put our nation and communities in a fundamentally more resilient, more optimized position to face the challenges and crises to come? I think what we're realizing is that top leaders, realize they can't sustain the benefits of transformation if they fundamentally haven't changed how they lead to reflect this new reality. So stepping back for a minute and putting on my previous public servant leader hat on, I think as public servants, it's important to understand why we are changing and what we're changing to. So, taking a moment, let's think about a few scenarios where I might be leaning in on IT, but maybe without applying living system leadership principles. So, for example, I might be seeking to transform, to be more nimble, more flexible and agile, really with the hopes of being prepared for the next challenge. But if I'm still making technology choices that are locking me in for multiple years to one vendor, or that vendor is making my data portability a pain, then my flexibility is actually pretty short-lived. Or if I want people to collaborate but don't demand interoperable solutions. Workspace, for example, has been specifically designed to not only be interoperable, but every feature is geared to reduce the friction around collaborating. I may also find myself making decisions and investments that have generational consequences and technology debt, without requiring them to be carbon neutral now and simply assuming that sustainability will be some other leader's problem in a few years. Or maybe I'm creating an amazing customer experience, but I failed to consider new security implications like potential bot attacks. And as a final example, and one that hits really close to home for me, is I might be seeking to attract new talent from diverse or underprivileged backgrounds, but I'm not embracing the technologies that they know that they use and that they love, and instead requiring tech that infer that they may not be qualified for the position and they may never apply. I say all of this, but because I know there's hope, because I am seeing this living system leadership everywhere. So whether it's USPTO intentionally navigate how to honor the time and experience of their incredible patent officers and examiners by using technology to give them an edge, or NIH, whose cloud lab model created flexible, easy ways for scientists to access the power of the cloud to propel learning and discovery, or State Department, who leveraged AI to avoid burnout of their team to help process thousands of documents, or even DIU, who leaned in to leverage the best commercially available secure cloud. So I think the question is, will the millions and even billions invested in IT modernization now simply be transactional upgrades, or will they be true transformations led by leaders who are evolving at light speed, the same way they're asking their technologies and platforms to evolve?
Those are some great examples and clearly some great points. Let me drill down a little into one of the areas you mentioned, and that's security. How has IT modernization helped federal agencies get a better handle on securing their most valuable systems?
Absolutely. And I think, over the years, security has tended to be kind of an incremental improvement evolution where we made good steps. So whether that was moving to cloud-based email or advancing multi-factor authentication or encryption, we have definitely made progress. But I feel like many of us recognize we might still be more in the halfway house to where we could be going, the state of play for many organizations. I do think that zero trust is really where we have the chance to move from evolutionary or incremental to revolutionary, because it's really a way we can coordinate and give a North Star to all of those security efforts. There's still a distance to go. For example, we may still be focused more on post-breach data versus, real-time security engagement. So I think we've made good progress, though, in a couple of different areas. I think one, there is a growing understanding and appreciation of cloud security. And I think that might be eroding even the last vestiges of kind of on-prem purists. I also think that we're seeing a lot of living system leaders, create safe collaboration spaces like Rad Labs. I'm excited about, really some of the new encryption, privacy, and data control paradigms, we really see are increasing the confidence of government leaders to start exploring the full benefits of modern and commercial technology. But most of all, what I really love is seeing some of these leaders lean forward, look at their mission, and ask themselves what they really need to do to be at that bleeding edge of their operational excellence and navigating things like OTA or ATOs, to ensure that they really are getting access to the technology they need to put their strongest foot forward. I think there's a few areas where we still have opportunity to be more intentional. I think one is just being really intentional about resilience and redundancy, whether that's multi-cloud or even continuity of operations. Many agencies are still functioning in a single vendor technology monoculture, which, in areas like their communications or operational tools without a plan B, which I think means they're really still very exposed. I think the other element, as I mentioned before, is as we digitize and engage citizens more and more and serve citizens better, there's also going to be new things to navigate, new levels of things like bots. And I think there's a lot that government can learn from the commercial sector who've had years of navigating these issues. And finally, I think the last one, and this will always be, I think, an ongoing journey for us in government, is really disaggregating security from compliance. We've seen time and time again over the past few years that our adversaries are simply not going to follow the compliance rule book, and that we really have to lean into true security and not simply assume that compliance means secure.
Well, and then picking up on one of your other thoughts earlier on, you talked about the customer experience. Since the White House issued the executive order on customer experience, I'm curious, how have you seen the federal government and agencies in particular taking steps to deliver a better digital experience and services for the American public?
Absolutely. For me, this was such a great leadership moment. Customer experience is both a no-brainer and a game changer in one. I think it's really important to understand that, around the world, government services often originated from government organizations that are in essence monopolies. And historically, monopolies, could deprioritize thinking about customer experience because people didn't really have a choice. But Wyatt, I look around to our amazing public customer experience, public CX leaders out there, and I see that times are changing. And, I think I'm really seeing those CX leaders realize that the bureaucracy is actually costing the taxpayer, most importantly in time, but also money. And interestingly enough, that time poverty that's created by cumbersome or bureaucratic systems often impact the people who can least afford it and who suffer the most from it. But I'm so excited to see those same CX leaders really turn to some amazing technologies to create that new, different experience. Whether that be virtual agents, whether that be document AI and automation, really critically things like translation and accessibility, making sure that services are really within reach of everyone. Even things like multi-agency data lakes, reducing the time to pull relevant data and to assist a transaction across different groups. groups. I think things like being proactive on eligibility and helping constituents really understand and be proactive in what they may be able to use or take advantage of that government can help them. I also think it's really interesting to look at things like sentiment. We really can connect with a level of customer intimacy that we've never been able to do before. And that gives us important insights on how to serve those customers, what they want, what they need. And I think finally, being proactive in that security mindset, for us using tools like reCAPTCHA to prevent bots and things like that. But all of those together, Wyatt, they're really what's helping to eliminate time poverty and making it easier to do business better and faster with government. And I think what's specifically exciting and unique for us at Google and Google Cloud, has been we've been with government at every step of the way because we know that we literally might be the first step, that first moment of curiosity that someone takes to engage government, and we're committed to closing that distance from, curiosity to completion, taking someone on that journey from the moment they Google it to hopefully they got it.
I love that phrase, curiosity to completion. Well said. Let me wrap up now by just asking, as you look across the federal IT landscape now, what stands out to you as having the biggest potential or need for modernization in coming years?
Sure, absolutely. I think if I can frame the last 2 years and maybe look ahead, to the next three, I think about digital maturity, in a model that I went on as a public servant. I think I first went looking for efficiencies, right? Then once I had some of those efficiencies, I sought insight, but often in silos within, the data, the information within my own walls, my own organization. And now I think what we are starting to see is that the value of those early insights, our aperture starts to open. We realize there's more information available, and the more finely tuned and accurate those insights can be, the better decisions we can make. And so I think now I'm really seeing, the turning of efforts to connecting to larger information flows, partners, really using things like APIs to drive better insights and decisions. I think next, we're really going to want to see people want to command that information flow, take the unruly, the unstructured, and the many systems they may have and make them work in concert. And finally, I think, we're going to want to see capitalization on that information flow to optimize the mission. And I think if I reflect, what is interesting about that journey, is that I can see for myself, it was as much about my vision and aperture as it was, in my leadership as it was about the technology. At first, my perception was really narrow. And as I made progress down my technology and information journey, my aperture widened. And staying in that constant state of adaptation, adapting our vision, our principles, and our expectation in order to really take advantage of what tech offers.
And finally, just to follow up on that, you mentioned the idea of adapting. So what are some of the things that leaders are going to have to keep adapting?
Absolutely. I think there are three. And I think one starts with really how we think. And that might mean closing the gaps between things we kept intentionally separate before. So an example of that might be hybrid work. New workforce realities are really closing the gap between personal and professional. Government workers are going to want to use the same technologies in their personal lives as in their professional. That might also mean bringing currently siloed systems, so email, learning, travel, program, databases that are all in different places and separate platforms, really together in one web-enabled system. Again, with the intentionality to reduce the friction and the time poverty that we might be creating for our own teams, making it as possible for them to be productive. I think a second area of adaptation is really, again, how we lead. So shifting into that new reality of the public servant as an information steward. Leaders are really going to need to develop skills and comfort level with leading and making decisions in an ever-changing information environment. And that might mean moving beyond having the perfect data to the best data I have in the moment. This will also signal a little bit of having to change our relationship with risk. So how can leaders become more comfortable making good decisions now instead of waiting for the perfect? And if there was one thing that I learned as a chief innovation officer, it's that government does not actually have an innovation problem. It has an innovation adoption problem. So being willing to unlock processes and procedure and even talent to allow our organizations to be truly tech enabled instead of simply asking tech to find its place in a current process. And finally, I think the last one, of course, is always where the rubber meets the road. We're going to have the way to think about adapting, how we spend and invest. So one of those things might be more dynamic budgeting, asking ourselves how much funding is going to maintain technology debt versus technology agility. It may also mean stopping accepting systems and vendors who don't build zero trust in, who don't play nicely with others or avoid interoperability, maybe who try to lock you into long contracts or paralyze your tool set, and who can't offer you carbon neutral systems now. And finally, it might mean using things like ATO or other transactional authorities to get the right tech. If you're going to do multi-year procurement or mechanisms or platforms, it might mean designing them to be broad and flexible and adaptable from the beginning, so that when that critical game-changing piece of technology that will revolutionize your mission becomes available, you can embrace it. And Wyatt, I have to admit something, and that is that I know, as far as adaptation goes, I know for myself that the platform and that I have to work on modernizing the most is actually the one between my own ears. And when I do, the rest of it seems to follow. I'm on that living system leadership journey with so many amazing public servants and technology leaders, who are leading their IT modernization and their digital transformation journeys, starting with their own leadership approach. I'm loving learning from them, and I hope others will join us.
Alexis Bonnell, thank you so much for joining us and sharing not only some of your thoughts, but just your enthusiasm about the possibilities of IT modernization in the federal government. So thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much, Wyatt.
And look for more of our coverage on IT modernization on fedscoop.com. Thanks for tuning in.